price change and you alter the price or the exchange rate or the interest rate. But when you have whole structures that require 2-3 years of investment to sustain the whole environmental, it is ridiculous, if I may say so. It's absurd for us to imagine that there's some crank you now, because all those things come into play. Right. You understand? We are being absolutely frank here. You know, all those things will affect the efficiency of your total resource allocation. All those things should have been cleaned up, should be reinvesting. Cocoa farms, the new seeds, building institutions, building the primary schools, building the structures that last. If you look at some of those structures, look at all the educational structures all over the country. During this Boko Haram, not Boko, well, I suppose it's also Boko Haram, abduction of students and so on. When they showed those schools, where some jokers will just bring their truck and take out school children, no solid structures, no security structures. Those are the things we have to do ahead of time. We can't come in this instance and say, oh, what is the quick fix? The quick fix is all those things we should have been doing before. We should have been removing subsidies in small bits over the last 10 years, 15 years. Where we remove some, we see a new area where it is needed, like it's needed in America or Russia or anywhere. But you can't just have an oil sector and people are buying the product at 50% of the international price. We are losing there too, you know? So, but to fix it, it's not just to fund the difference, but to bridge that gap by solid structures that are sustainable.
Right. Right, so I'd still like you to look at this issue of subsidy for us. And right now, of course, with the removal of subsidy, at the federal allocation level, states are getting more money. Is it right for us to be sharing the gains of subsidy at this level, or saving, or putting it into something more meaningful for the benefit of the nation?
We've had a blind-sighted view of the whole matter. You see, you might call it what we term money illusion. The real value of money is not the volume of money. It's what the money can buy. That's the real value of the money. So we have to make a distinction between sharing more and having more purchasing power. Because with your inflation at 25, 29, 30%, well, the increase has to be more than that before you now begin to assess. I'm talking in general terms. For the subsectors, depending on whether you are concentrating on agricultural purchases or non-agricultural purchases, what is the real value of the extra money you have is a function of how much more you have beyond the mere money illusion of higher currency, higher cash you have. So we talked about all this when we were talking about debt relief and all the money saved. Now we're talking about removal of subsidy and all the money saved. Well, you have to be very careful how you gauge what additional money they are getting. In terms of what they are purchasing, what the states and subunits, what the general population are able to get because they are getting more money by charging more because of the inflation, unless it covers the cost of production, you may be worse off. In other words, those budgets, those federal allocation shares they are getting, may be less than what they were getting 2 years before because of the value. New price regime they face. They are not able to employ as many teachers as we would have thought. They are not able to maintain the school equipment. They can't buy new equipment, you know, and the salaries they pay may not purchase the same thing as they did two budget years before. So we have to be very careful to now begin to talk about what we are going to save beyond what you can consume. To even maintain your purchasing power may be the immediate problem they must be facing with increasing number to deal with in terms of people in the system, patients in hospitals, and what have you. So I hope money illusion has to be explicitly taken into account in assessing the net gain from the removal of subsidy.
Right.
What is clear is that by removing subsidy and allowing the price to reflect the market, the real market value, you can stop untoward inter-border flows, all these policing battalions to police your borders. All you have to do is make sure that the price differential is not worth anybody's while to carry these things and go to Niger or Cameroon or Benin Republic and so on and so forth. You understand?
Right.
That's where the policy comes in. It's not the administrative blocking people from taking it abroad. The price differential should be such. The same thing with all the talk about BDCs and the black market and the rest of it. It's the price that is the issue. It's not the number of BDCs. It's not the trade by BDCs. It is be able to sustain a market allocative efficiency that keeps that differential to the minimum. For administrative time frame, lags, those are the things that confer any benefit.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting in the central bank, you can run quickly somewhere and buy a currency as you are boarding a plane. The differential should be so small. And of course, when you are doing that, no person in their good mind will go and be buying millions of foreign exchange on the roadside. Because this requires documentation, it requires planning, even aside of the security implications.
Right.
So the way you stop all those things is not by reducing BDCs to 2 or 3 or 5. It's by having policies that have that allocative efficiency that creates minimum administrative difference. Like we've had it for years, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. All of a sudden, we started having all kinds of windows, and we didn't have windows restructured in terms of dimensions.
Right.
By nominally allocating, somebody allocates, superior intelligence allocates people's tastes and desires as to how much they should pay for foreign exchange. Those things are what you can remove instantly.
Right.
You understand?
Yeah.
Aside the corruption and the rest of it. And of course, it's all these things that bred the corruption beyond what should normally be the case.
Well, you talk about corruption. Just very briefly, before I bring you back to some issues about the CBN, why is corruption so endemic in this country?
Well, everything is at the back of that. You know, we've talked about appropriate development of manpower. When you develop manpower, you don't have enough to come up with great ideas that move the system efficiently, that create maximum growth, and you are not having the kind of explosion of opportunities, and people begin to cut corners, and you have to now start paying for cutting corners, and somebody is ready to allow you to cut corners. It's all interconnected. That's why it's more now than before.
Right.
Before, the guy who was manning the roadblock, he wasn't manning a roadblock worrying about how to pay his children's school fees or how to pay his health bill, or how to buy his normal necessities for himself and for his children. But these days, he's distracted by all what he needs to do because of all the inefficiencies we have created through inadequate manpower, inadequate growth, inadequate efficient allocation of people to what they can do best, and so on, and down the line. There's nothing very strange about that. It's all part of the whole system. So we have to deliberately identify those points and begin to correct them. And when you begin to correct them, you are home free. You don't have to worry about how soon you do it. Once the system is correcting and people are getting that tendency ingrained in their mentalities again, the chances are they will face their work, they'll be more efficient. If they are not efficient, they are fired, not because they are from east, west, or north. They are fired because they are not producing. They are hired by the same token because they are qualified, they have the experience, they will do the work right. All of those things, we have to find ways of going back to basics. It may sound very complicated, but it's really very simple. It's just a matter of our determination and our planning and our ability to follow through. Once everybody gets that system, it's like Nigerians who don't want to stay in queue. When they go abroad where people stay in queue, whatever you have to stay in queue because somebody will hit you over the head in some form. Make you do it, and you don't want to do that, so you fall in. We can do the same here. Once somebody will not allow you to cut corners, you know, you don't need to do so many things that we have to do now. You don't have to. And this may sound like being evangelical about it. No, please. I'm talking strictly on systems. And systems working the way they're supposed to do. Discipline and order, or an ordered framework, you know.
Right. I'd like you to quickly look at this comment by the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy while appearing before the Senate Committee on Finance just recently. He disclosed that the policy of the past administration, which resulted in free printing of Naira for 8 years without corresponding production, is one of the major causes of Nigeria's current economic situation. I'd like your thoughts on that. And secondly, the CBN also says that the excess demand for foreign exchange is one of the factors responsible for the free fall of the Naira. I'd like to ask you, what needs to be done to strengthen the Naira and bring it back to its pride of place?
It is an anomaly for us to be looking at the end point. That's what we do when we talk about strengthening the Naira. We've spent the whole last how many minutes talking about all the fundamentals. It is the fundamentals that are at issue. Address the fundamentals, you've done the job. Printing of currency, there are systems that reflect how you create increase in the money supply, how you create instrumentalities to control money supplies. There are ratios that the financial sector, including the banks, are supposed to follow in order to make sure that you do not flood the system with so much money. But you know, I think it goes way beyond just the last administration. I think most people admit that the last administration, for some reason, just got too careless about even exercising minimum control. But this goes way beyond that. And policies have to acknowledge that if you propagate policies that assume that all that printed money is within the system, a lot of that money is not even within the system. So if you propagate policies that will mop up, they can only mop up within the system. Those that are outside the system, they are so difficult to mop up. So yes, but you know, it's not quite as exact as it may sound.
You spoke about the sustained mismanagement of the exchange rate, that as long as the Naira, equivalent of the dollar, continues to change fast, I think you've addressed some of those issues. To compensate somebody who imported in dollars, the government had to give him the equivalent of the new Naira level.
It's not the government.
Yeah.
It's the market.
Right.
It's the market.
Right.
So that means that as long as you allow the market to reflect that abundance or scarcity, the government doesn't have much to do with it. But if there is a hiatus that is substantial enough and the government has a reason to feel that, they better upload some of the currencies they have in reserve in order to give a sense of higher supply that the market is giving. Well, maybe you can do that, but those are far and far between. Most other things, I mean, the government doesn't react when your white shirt or your white tie or white suit, when the price goes up. Nobody comes to give you them. You just stop buying them. When you don't buy them, that's what brings down the price. And that applies to every commodity. But where you yourself say, no, this suit must cost 200, that's where the problem comes. Right. If you don't declare what the price of the petroleum should be here, those who are importing will adjust, and those who are buying will know how to do more efficiency, be more efficient in their use of the product, whether it is gas or oil or shirts or underpants, whatever. The market helps to do that. The government doesn't have to get involved.
Right. The CBN, that's the central bank, recently hiked the interest rate to a record high of 22.5%. There are fears of increased non-performing loans as a result of this policy. What are the implications?
Well, I think in a normal system, we've talked about the lags. There are lags in the system. We've talked about the inclusivity of the object of this policy within the system so that the policy impacts on them. But when there's a lot of impact that falls outside this system, in other words, you can raise interest rates. If you raise it by 10 basis points, that's large. 15 is large. Anything above that, then you have to begin to worry what impact it could have. But the tendency to say, see, no more free money, we are going to encourage money to come into the system. Once you give that incentive, you give that tendency, you give it time for it to work through. You may not be stopping with one sledgehammer total increase, because the base over which it will apply may not be there. And to the extent that that base is there, the policy may not have the same effect. It will be forced to work sluggishly towards the end, whereas you could have more properly phased it 10, 15 or whatever instead of one sledgehammer approach. Once you give that tendency, we are going to move, we are going to tighten money. But in tightening money, you're also looking at the fiscal side. We are going to make sure that credit will be available. So you are not looking at just demand push to curb. You are looking at to stop cost push. Cost push means you have to find ways of increasing supply so you don't have to increase the price on this side before you bridge the differential at the equilibrium level.
Right.
So all of this is checks and balances. It's both cost push, it's demand push. The same vigor with which you are trying to stop the demand, you have to also use the same vigor to improve the supply side. So you don't have to put a whole sledgehammer of triple basis points beyond what you should have done. I'm just speaking generally, you know, not just with the recent policy, but with previous policies like this currency thing. You print money and you say, no, that should be enough for you guys. And then you end up affecting reproduction because you are affecting the entire supply chain by not providing enough liquidity. At that given level of technology, given the problems with distribution through shortage of transportation, there are all kinds of things that you have to look at within the production matrix before you start imposing things. You can't impose things where you say, no, you can't have so much cash because you can transfer, you use it, just transfer. Everybody talks as if they're all working in the central bank and the major banks. What about the people in the villages that don't even have power? And these days, we are not just talking about people in the villages. 50% in the urban areas are not getting power, maybe more than 50%. So if you introduce policies that presume that these things are working seamlessly, to that extent will they not work? And it will be no use to say we have great policy, is the implementation. No. Those policies should have ab initio taken into account the system within which they should work.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Let's talk politics.
What?
Let's talk politics. You've had the privilege of being in several parties.
I didn't plan it that way.
You've been in the Justice Party. You've been in the New Nigeria People's Party. You've been in the PDP. Now you're in the APC. First of all, there's a school of thought that believes that politics in Nigeria today has become a vehicle to secure power and privilege rather than advance the public good. How can this narrative be changed?
Politicians, you know, we've talked about manpower and so on and so forth. We have to create more efficiency. So the pursuit of...
I don't want you to answer these questions as an economist.
I'm coming. So I'm coming there.
Right.
So the issue is ideally by now, you know, the old idea, and people may laugh at it, the old idea where we got frustrated and we say, we are going to set up only two parties. Let's work with two parties by force. Of course, Democrats will say nonsense, you know, don't come and, you know. But maybe we should have tried that for a little while before we let it go overboard. Social Democratic Party, National Democratic Party, and then however we make the differentials, you know, to let people understand that what is important is getting vehicles to secure power that enables you to mobilize resources to develop. You can't get away from the economic question. There's no overriding single political thing. People want policy to get, what did you call it, power and
privilege.
Privilege. The privilege should come, the privilege from being the privilege to serve. I was listening to we are the AWO Foundation just a few days ago, and he emphasized, like I'm sure his colleagues then also emphasized, they call it the privilege to serve, privilege to live, not privilege for privileges, not privilege for cornering things to themselves. That came out very clearly. So immediately you said that, that was my first reaction. The privilege is not, the privilege I will feel is, well, I study a subject and I helped in some other countries. If I get the privilege to exercise those skills in my own country, that will be very, very satisfying, regardless of the perquisites that come with it. You understand? That's the difference. It's not, you're not getting it so that you have a big house and you have big cars. Well, you saw how long it took us to organize power here, so you know this is not the sort of privilege one is looking at. See, so my whole gliding through already tells you the kind of politician I was. I was a politician for his own sake, to get this privilege to be able to demonstrate that development was possible. That is allowable for some of us to say. That was our own basis for seeking political office. Is that chance you had, and one demonstrated under the military era where it was not politics, but you had a chance to be able to mobilize and introduce ideas, you know, IMO formula where they talked about how to introduce the value-added tax and some of these. Those are the things that some of us value for having that power. I don't know how many houses or whatever, none of those things should come out. And you know that right now, because of the inefficiencies in our system, all this is not coming out in the media. We are horrified at some of the things that have happened. But it's not so much politics as a breakdown in the development of the manpower, the breakdown of orderliness, the breakdown of law and order, the breakdown of the real essence of checks and balances.
What about the breakdown of values?
Yes, that is fundamental. Yes. But when all those things break down, they connote breakdown of values. So we have to be very concerned to devise ways of effectively, it's not holier than thou such, but how do you, we are all sinners in a sense, but how do we make sure that sinners won't get the opportunity or won't get away with it when they do sin? That is what we should be looking at, not just altruistic values or something, but with sanctions, instant, predictable, without, like we talk about the blindfolded order, justice. Even-handed justice should be even-handed. When that is the case, then the privileges won't come, because if they come, somebody will apply the sanction regardless of who you are or where you come from, what your religion is or what your ethnic or whatever, all these other issues won't come in there. So it's a very serious subject. But we need to evolve more leadership that will focus more on that. These days, this flamboyance, this expectation, it's like the leaders are as guilty as the followers, because if you do it and you meet the needs of your followers, oh, they are fine with it. And if you don't do it, of course, they rebuke you. They think you are an idiot. They think you are a failure. So you have to bring that value from both sides. those who are abusing it, and those who are expecting it, the benefits of this thing. It's a very serious subject.
Right.
We have to deal with it. And it goes back to, as we said, the school system, the tutelage, you know, the discipline within the framework, and so on. Very serious subject. For a country that there could be, as I said, in a few years' time, number 3 in population, number 9 in GDP. Never mind, we may not get there, because unless we deal with we have serious health issues. Yes, if we don't deal with serious health issues. During our time, we came up, my colleague who was primary, who was in the health sector, came up with the primary health care. This was a fundamental subject that should be there. We've fooled around with medical insurance. It's a crisis we have on our hands now. People can't afford medical bills. And why, if somebody has an opportunity to pick what he shouldn't pick because he knows he needs to go out to do his medical, then how do you stop him from doing it when you see that this is the only way he can pay for his medical? So all of these are all interrelated. And there are no quick fixes. We have to take a holistic approach and plan it. How do we get away from this very undeserving place we are, given what nature, given what the good Lord endowed us with? We are acting as if we don't have anything. So we have to grab whatever comes our way. Whereas we have everything. Look at our forestry. Look at all the productivity we could have had. What are we doing with it? And it's not just that. Look at our oil, look at our gas, look at the sunshine for our solar, look at the coal we had, look at everything, all means of hydro, everything, we had it. Look at where we are in terms of power supply. And that is so fundamental to everything else. Right. You know. So those are basic questions we need to be asking now, regardless of where we come from, regardless of what party we are in, or whatever other considerations. If we don't do that, we are not going to solve the problem. And lastly, I should say again, we've sustained this for so long that we should not be talking about what can quickly be done, what are quick fixes. We should stop the quick fix approach. We should look at the linkages in the system. How do you pick them apart so we can solve them effectively, right, so that we can sustain a better structure going forward, politically and otherwise.
Right. You talked about leadership earlier, and former President Olusegun Obasanjo just recently again said that without good leadership, Africa can't go fast, Nigeria can't go fast, and move far together. What is the problem with leadership? And how can we begin to create a system, a culture, where new leaders will emerge?
Well, it's about everything we've been talking about, you know. It's a very big question, and I don't think it's something anybody can answer so easily. Because, like I was talking about production, we talk about the industrial matrix, you know, all the supply chains, materials, infrastructure, financial flows and so on, fund allocation and so on. The same thing with leadership. It starts from the home. The home can be what they used to be. We had homes, and we probably still have homes, where those attributes that lead to good leaders come out of. But we should be clear that we are now growing homes that are forced to problem solving that was really beyond the home. As I said, some guy has to worry, my son has to get this. In those days, we built the right schools. And people who came to those right schools, regardless of where they are from, they competed. And they were chosen, and there was that hierarchy in terms of position and so on and so forth. Once you really begin to veer off those competitive, naturally competitive hierarchies in institution building, in institution development of manpower, that's where the problem starts from. That's where we have to get back to, you know. And we've gone very far out of it, but I don't think it's irreversible. What is important is to explicitly recognize the problem. That recognition of the problem is one thing. Right now, if some people want to just wave over the problem like it doesn't matter. How can it not matter? In those days, at the top of, in the grade schools, people came from remote villages. It used to be jokes. You joke about where somebody came from, where he didn't have this, he didn't have that. But those were jokes. Like you have all this initiation. I'm talking about where I went to school. We had all this, but it was supposed to be just jokes about, oh, this guy came from where maybe nobody ever had a bicycle or had a car or something. These were just jokes. But that also showed you that nothing stops somebody from coming from the most supposedly disadvantaged background to the best environment. Every time it will go around, every time it will go around. By the time they go around, you are developing, creating higher levels nationally. So in whatever way we can rebuild our institutions, we have to do so. To do so, we have to provide roads, we have to provide power, we have to have a system of oversight that is not based on who you are or where you come from. Those are the things we have to reinstate. And then, of course, create the opportunities in numbers that will not create undue competition because there are few spaces. That's another thing. If the system does not expand enough for those who are, some people are waiting at, I won't say what public entity. An official comes out there and says to all these people with their certificate and say, well, if you don't know anybody there, you better just go. And I was shocked. If you, like, okay, let's say it was a coal corporation. Let me just give an innocuous. You want a job in the coal corporation, and somebody says, unless you have, you know someone in the coal corporation.
So it's no longer based on merit.
Exactly. What paper you are using, whatever you did is of no relevance. And they were saying it with such conviction. And those they were saying it were accepting with such conviction because both sides accepted that these were the new norms for the society. How can that be? By the time you get there, something is very, very wrong. Oh, if you don't know anybody in there, just go. The person should be ashamed to say that. The people who are hearing should be indignant.
Should not accept
but
that.
both sides accepting that that's the way things are. Then you really, you are in a rut.
Let me ask you, sir, to very quickly look at the issue of restructuring for us as a way of having a new and modern Nigeria. And also the debate over state police, which was addressed recently by the present administration, as a solution to Nigeria's security challenges.
Which one do you want me to address?
I'd like you to look at restructuring and then the issue of state police.
Well, I have very distinct differences about this, which I have been, since the time, let's see, who was, I think during the Abacha regime, I was a Minister of Finance at that point when they were setting up on constitutionalists. I think I think we've got to a point where we have to go back to the basics. And I know a lot of my friends say, oh, no, it's just constitutional, we just go back. And when I say a lot of my friends, very influential people, and with well-meaning, no question about that. But I think, as I said, we've got to a place where we have to go back to the basics. And when I say basics, I think back to the local government level. Somebody else was talking about that, restructuring back to the level where naturally you belong to a local government. Then we organize the local governments such that they are more or less same size. They can't be the same size. Definitely these are different terrains, these are different climatic conditions, but more or less if you can say, 60,000 to 7,000, even if you have to gerrymander to include others who might be outside, but you give a latitude of the population. If we face the kind of powers, the economic rights, the voting rights, the political rights for anybody within that local government, irrespective of where they come from, same economic rights, the same political rights. If you sort out that problem, then we start saying, okay, how many states do we want? The interest in the states will win. How many zones do we want? How many provinces do we want? I think we should go back to that local government. A lot of people tell me, no, they can't accept that. I say, well, you see, we are not doing this for us now, who have all these cleavages to these things now. We are doing it for our children and grandchildren. 50 years from now, they couldn't be bothered. They couldn't be bothered, but you have a system that is propelled by some sort of development purpose that can handle just about every project other than the very largest. Of course, currency and the rest of it will always be at the center because those are attributes of sovereignty. Large projects like maybe even railways, I doubt local governments can handle that. But groups of states can handle that. Zones can handle that. But let's go back to local government where we give the rights, equal rights to the individuals. The indigenization nonsense should stop. Once that stops, subsequently there'll be dynamics of demographic changes, but you keep it. If you are there in that local government, you are entirely a Nigerian. If you are a foreigner and you get the what do you call it, rights of citizenship, you are subject to it. And the local governments, that will reduce our local governments to maybe 350, 360 from 700 and something. But they'll be larger, they'll be able to handle so many projects.
And more effective.
More effective. And the rationale will be they can go into projects, education, health, all kinds of things, except the largest capital intensive things. The very largest. Even at certain levels of development, they can even tackle those, maybe they can cooperate freely to tackle those large things. So that's my view about the restructure. I think that's what we need to do. But a lot of people don't agree. They think, oh, let's just go back to the 19th century constitution. But I think a lot of units have tasted the divisions. And some people say, oh, this is like going back to Egypt. They don't want to go back to where there was Enugu and Ibadan and Kaduna. Everybody was under it. A lot of people don't, and I respect that. But let's take it down to that local government. Then the agglomeration to states and zones will be negotiated, or if we also sort of arbitrarily impose any number, okay, we want 25 states, or we want 30, or we want 40 states. Right. But those local governments are set based on the affinity that you already have, that local government. And you carve up this north-south struggle and identity, east-west identity, because you have had to restructure the local level. So when you are now coming together, you are coming down on the basis of this local thing. Well, this is my view of that. There was another
the issue of state policy.
The state policy, I think those should come naturally as you talk about disaggregation in order to be more effective at the local level. But against that, let's be realistic. We have to get to that level where we are now bringing political power and the struggle for power and the rest of it, where this thing can be abused. That's what a lot of people feel. So we have to decide at what point do we do it and how do we implement it in such a way as to prevent people from using state police. You understand? Right. Look at the struggle with political parties already. How much more where they now have power to intervene in the normal dynamic evolution of political interest, political cleavage, political association, and so on. We don't want that to be abused. But are we going to wait until we get there before we make sure we disaggregate power so that security can be more effectively enforced? Those are the two issues, and we should not pretend that we are there or that we'll never get there. Right. So to me, it's a matter of being alive to these two conflicting potential abuse. The abuse of political abuse and also the effectiveness of
state police.
Yes.
Right. I'd like to ask you, sir. The Oronsanye report was recently brought up again by this present administration, and which he wants to implement in terms of the recommendations of that body. That report was written in 2012. I'd like you to look at this report from 3 angles: the relevance now, the timeliness, and the impact it will have if implemented.
Well, I must confess, as you say, my forte has been looking at the economic history rather than institutional thing. But I agree with you that definitely I think they should look at it to get the relevance. It's to get the relevance in terms of the time frame and the institutional strength and spread and the exigencies of the current administration. It's not something you just say, oh, come and implement the Orosanye report. It has to be thoroughly reviewed. The same thing, all this question about the constitutional thing for 2014 and you should just go and implement or go back to the 1963 constitution. With all due respect to how we have not lived up to our expectations, the sheer dynamism of the Nigerian population, the whole world still can see it, regardless of you can say a lot of noise and not that much efficiency, but the noise has amounted to something. So it's only proper that we should look at it properly, get a body to review it properly and make recommendations of what you can abstract from it based on the current realities. As you mentioned, as we were discussing before we started off, the institutions are so many more, the agencies are so many more. Do we have too many agencies? Most people will say probably we do. Probably we do. And they've been so haphazardly created and they have just mushroomed. So we should redefine, take time to redefine the objective policy of a nation, the economic policy, the political policy. And it's only around those major policies that agencies can now be recreated and structured the way they can work. I don't think it's time for us to stop just proliferation by whims and caprices, which is what we've had that led to the institution of that committee in the first place. It is time for us to take another look at it, definitely.
Right. You've worked as a World Bank economic strategist. I'd like you to look at bodies like the IMF, the World Bank. There appears to be a misconception about their real intentions, especially in Africa. What really is the interest of these international bodies in Africa?
Well, it's not just because, see, I worked, I don't want to go through my own history. I'm writing my autobiography now. I don't want to sort of talk about that, but it was just by chance I ended up at the World Bank.
Right.
I was hired on the basis of some work I had done in graduate school. I happened to be a Nigerian, but they never considered assigning me to Africa or to Nigeria, for that matter. And many of us Nigerians at the World Bank, they were working for Latin America, Europe, and so on and so forth. So it is absurd. I think it's a measure of a lack of understanding for people to even talk about the IMF and the World Bank as if they are institutions or countries that have their own special interests. These are professionals. Their jobs are to evolve policies to help different countries, different regions develop. And if you like, their advancement in those positions are based on how well they do their job. That already means that the question is totally irrelevant to say what are their interests. Their interests, they were set up at the end of Second World War to help Europe. Africa was still under colonial tutelage. To help Europe, how do they solve their energy, their manpower, their transportation, their communications, and so on. That's why they were set up, their currencies, and so on. Like the IMF was mainly on the currency and all those things that affect international exchange and trade. But how the idea developed that, oh, those people are there to make sure we don't do And the next minute people say that, the next minute they say, oh, but the World Bank says this. They are quoting the same IMF and the World Bank to justify certain ideas. After the previous second, giving the impression that, oh, these people are just there to dig a hole and put you in it. So a lot of that is totally misconstrued. And for some of us, it's very, you feel ashamed that our own people are still so far behind just to at least understand the fundamentals. No, they are not there. They are limited by their skills.
But by any the former president said you can't say no to the World Bank.
That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Are you talking about OBJ?
Yes.
I'm sorry because we've argued about this. No. I've personally been in meetings where such issues came up. Right. And of course, maybe he assumes, well, you call me Idika. What do you expect Idika to say? He used to be one of us. I said, no. Those are not true. People take pride in having helped Korea and Singapore and Malaysia and Indonesia and India and China, Russia, for that matter. How much less, or solving problems or certain crises, oil crisis. This is their expertise. They are picked from top performers as far as graduates. They could all be masters from great schools, great opportunities they've had to study and so on. So they're supposed to be highly skilled set of people. It's the expertise that brings to bear. It's not their politics. The IMF is not a country. It's an international organization with all kinds of people. It's just that the tradition developed where the headship comes from Europe and the World Bank is America. But that is getting sort of blurred now. Right. So it's a lot of unwarranted misconception, and it has gone on for too long. Yeah. Of course, there might be political issues coming up. There was a time with Allende in Chile where it was thought that America was using their membership to push against certain World Bank or IMF policies. Those are just few and far between, and they'll be challenged by other members. And of course, the voting is the more shares you have in terms of course, the higher your vote. But all that has been so diluted. As you can see, some of the oil-rich countries have very, very heavy shares. But in the bank and fund, nobody really looks at the political pressure arising from the share you have as a means of voting. It's a question of what is right, what is the correct development policy rather than private economic interests. That is. So to say what is their interest, I mean, you are talking about Ghanaians and Nigerians and Liberians, and you say what's their interest in Africa? Obviously. And then some of them are deciding interest in Latin America. They are deciding interest in Asia. So they are not seeing at their interest. Their objective is development, to help those countries to develop. When Korea, to give you an example, when Korea was going fast importing raw materials from Malaysia, Indonesia, and the rest of them. And when those countries now, you can use the term woke up to also start their own industrialization, Korea had to decide what to do. And the original structural adjustment program, that's where the term came from. We had a heavy mission that went to Korea to sit with them and say, now what do you do? The Malaysians, the Indonesians, the Thai people, everybody wants to develop high-level textiles and so on. So what do you do? How do you restructure your economy to a higher level where you can stay competitive? That is the origin of the structural adjustment program. All the misnomer here, all that's just nonsense, really. Nonsense.
Right. Let me ask you, sir, on the final note to tell us, what is the Nigeria of your dream?
What?
The Nigeria of your dream.
Well, we've touched on it here and there. I think naturally, you see, we Nigerians, I wouldn't say we are loudmouths, but we are that. We are very proud, we're very talkative. And even when we were just leaving school, I remember showing up in America. I've told this story elsewhere, where we felt so full of ourselves, and then smaller African countries, and they are talking about their leaders. Nigerians like, well, yes, so leaders, so but the big country, No, we think that it would be only right for us to live up to our potential. That's the starting point. If, never mind whether it's Lord Lugard or whoever it was that sort of clawed the place together the way it is, we are here together. Or if we want to break it into three, that's good too, but we should do it in the interest of the people, not a few leaders just saying they want it, they want that. But that is not obviously what, for some of us, we don't look at that in that sense. What we should do is to make the best of this big agglomeration of, there must be up to almost 400 different ethnic groups here. And we should be able to show that we can weld this together, not because of one political control under a colonial power, but because we're able to see the essence. Look at the Americans during the Floyd incident. You see some Americans who wish there was a homeland. And some of us felt that Ghana was doing a good job of creating that sense of a homeland. And to some extent you could have that with in South Africa, although it's just the opposite, with the minority lording over the majority there. But here was a large country. We were very proud of our government when they were intervening to help all these countries develop. When I was in primary school here, Nigeria was sending lawyers to defend the Kikuyus and the Jomo Kenyattas, and we were sending people all over the place. We saw ourselves as a major country that can really intervene. We used to have staff who will invite some of their friends from other places. When they come here, they always look at us like, oh, you guys are really a little bit, they say, you know, that's a nice way to talk to us when you are telling us Rhodesians or the way they call them in those days and so on. We are not quite as up to it as possible. So I see a Nigeria that can be up there if we can be number 9. Number 9 means a whole lot. Number 9 is not just in number 3 in population. Number 9 in GDP means we are creating a lifestyle here, a standard of living, a technology here, an industrial structure here that can compete very effectively, can be even more competitive than most countries. But if you are number 9, it looks like, and you have all these material advantages, there is no indication that we are short of the brains, that is just numbers. Why shouldn't we be up there? That's the kind of Nigeria that I think of all the time.
Right. Thank you very much, sir, for taking time out to talk to us. I appreciate your coming on the program.
Thank you much.
Our guest on today's edition of The Conversation has been Dr. Kalu Idika Kalu, politician and foremost economist. My name is Kola Akintoba. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.